So we're live at Senate Education Committee. Still April 22nd. We're back after a short break, and we are switching from 484 to the miscellaneous ed bill, the number of which I always said that 480. And we have a new version somewhere. We have our legislative council list. It is 7.1. Yep. So just for the committee, just a reminder for the committee, we've erred on the side of throwing everything in on the theory that we go through it and make our decisions. So this is a new version that just is hot off the press today, right?
Yes.
Yesterday. And Beth and I had a short discussion yesterday and trying to get it ready for us. So I had some hope of getting this out of here this week. So be thinking about that as we go. And maybe we can, couple other things. Be thinking about if there's a couple of sections you'd be comfortable reporting that interest you in particular. I'd be interested in, do a little bit of shared reporting on the floor. And also as we go, whether we can just check the box and say we've got this section down. So turn the floor over to legislative council to help us with the walkthrough.
Good afternoon, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're going to walk through draft 7.1 of your proposal of amendment to H 480, the Education Miscellaneous Bill. Would you like me to share my screen?
Sure. I think because of people watching from elsewhere.
Okay, so I've done my best. The more we get to know each other, the more you will realize that I'm horrible at highlighting things. But I've done my best to highlight changes between the last draft we looked at, which I believe the actual last draft that you all looked at was draft 5.1. There was a 6.1 in between, and now we're at 7.1. So highlighted language is new language. So if I skip over something that's not highlighted and you'd like to walk through it, please just let me know. So I'm going to start with section 1. This is the school safety reader assistance heading there on line 7, page 1. And the first section is an amendment to the School Safety Bill itself, Act 29 from 2023, a bit of session law regarding behavioral threat assessment teams implementation. For just a second, we're going to skip the highlighted language. And we're going to go, you'll see that on page 2, line 17, this section was already included in the bill with the recommendation to strike subsection C. Now there's a new recommendation here, and that is the language that appears on page 1, line 12. So remember, if the language is not underlined, current law. So establishment of behavioral threat assessment teams. Currently, school districts and independent schools not already using behavioral threat assessment teams are required to take all actions necessary to establish a team not later than July 1st, 2025. What this language proposes to do is say it's not all actions necessary they need to get going by July 1, 2025. It's just establishing a team and identifying members. And then on line 17, school districts and independent schools would need to take all actions necessary to implement behavioral threat assessment teams not later than October 1st, 2025. And then what that means, all of the actions they would need to be taking remain the same on page 2. It's highlighted, but it remains the same. And that's it for amendments to section 1.
So just to make sure we don't have this down, the real difference in this section with all the yellow is simply in effect versus steps to get into effect.
Kind of. So they have to establish a team by July 1. And then the team needs to be essentially ready to go by October 1st. Is that a fair way to put it? Okay. And I should say that this is this language came to me, or us, or you, by way of the Agency of Education, and I believe well, it came by way of the agency of education. I'll let them speak for themselves if you like to figure out how this language came to. And then, the effective dates here, we're still in section 1. Amending the effective dates for Act 29. And so you'll see that there is some strikeout language that's not highlighted, which means it's language you've looked at before. So section 1480 would take effect instead of last year. We're giving everyone until this July. And then 1485 would take effect on July 1, 2025. Except that subdivision B3 would take effect on October 1st of 2025. And subsection E would take effect on July 1, 2027. Subsection or subdivision B3, we just walked through. This is subsection B and then the subdivision 3. And that's certifying. Oh, actually, nope, this is session law. It's down here, this section. The policy section in section 2 on page 15. So on page 3, line 15. Starting on line 15, this language would take effect on October 1st, 2025. And then subsection E would take effect, I believe that's data collection, on July 1, 2027. Okay. Section 2 is an amendment to section 1485 itself, the behavioral threat assessment use statute. And here you have.
Yes. Sorry.
When are you ready to start seeing if there's like straw poll consensus?
So it's a little bit more behavioral threat assessment still in section 2.
She's about to shit. Right?
No.
Yeah, because we're still in behavioral. I thought about that.
Okay. I thought we.
But almost.
So I'm on section 2, page 3, line 15. If you remember, there was some discussion over whose responsibility it is to develop policy and whose responsibility it is to develop procedures. It is school board's responsibility under current law to develop policy, and it is, I learned something in this process. It is actually in statute that it is the superintendent's responsibility to develop procedures. Statute that I have never had an occasion to look at before, and now I know. So this language is essentially making it clear whose responsibility is what. So it's a school board. If the school board fails to adopt policies, then they would have presumed to have adopted the most current model policy published by the secretary. That's lines 20 and 21. And then starting on line 21 on page 3, going on to page 4, any superintendent or independent school that fails to adopt the procedures would be presumed to have adopted the most current model procedures established by the secretary. And that ends the school safety sections of the bill.
Any questions on that? Or to ask the question, are we ready to put a check next to it?
I'm good.
Okay, so we are going to check off section, well, really sections. Because these sections work, it's all section 1, I guess, right?
It's section 1 and section 2.
Yeah.
Section 2 begins on page 3, line 10. Okay, this draft makes no changes to section 3, post-secondary schools chartered in Vermont.
Okay, and so as we go, it'll be good to write okay next to section 3. Pretty basic, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Section 4.
Section 4 this draft makes no changes to the public bids section regarding school food accounts and purchases made from them. The change is starting on the bottom of page 5 on page 6.
Just quickly remind us what this does.
So this section of law specifies when school districts need to, it talks about public bids and when they need to go out to bid, depending on how much the contract is for, et cetera. And so the change, the language on page 6 would say that the provisions of this section, meaning the entire statute, would not apply to contracts for the purchase of food made from nonprofit school food services account.
Good with this section? Is this a yes? Okay. So,
This section, this draft does not make any changes to the virtual learning sections. Section 5 is codifying the virtual learning, a virtual learning program. And then section 6 is an amendment to the definition of virtual learning. And this draft makes no changes to either section.
good. See heads nodding. So yes on 5.
Section 7,
Yes on
again,
6. Yes.
no changes. This is the BOCES Startup Grant Program, allowing supervisory unions who are contemplating forming a BOCES to apply for grant money prior to the formation, versus current law, which requires the actual formation of a BOCES.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, section 8 is, you also did not make any changes to section 8, which is requiring, personal learning plans and information about post-secondary, planning options to include, all military-related options.
Going. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
do want to
Sorry.
be louder.
Yeah. Okay,
Can I recommend something here?
yes.
So Senator Ram Hansel and I try to push this along via another bill introduced, melded it into 480.
Okay.
There's actually 2 guards. I think it would be powerful if one of the 2 guardsmen, one retired, one active, carried this section. I think that would be useful in the chamber. That's my own thought. Otherwise, I'd be happy.
Okay, so Mark, we'll mark you, not like that. What's that?
We're on section, that's section 8, starts on page 8, line 19.
And Senator.
Well, it's, Senator Heffernan reported anything, anyway?
Well, we can decide.
He's not here.
And
He can do the finance portion. Yeah, we'll give the arts. Yeah.
Okay,
If you want to switch with him, that's up to you. You should probably. Yeah. So where are we now?
section 9. And now we start to get into the most of the changes, since the last draft of this bill. So section 9 is an amendment to 3 VSA 2702, which is the section regarding the Secretary of Education appointment. And the changes occur on page 12. So, what came over to you from the House was the state board had to begin a robust national search process, not later than 60 days after public notification of a vacancy in the Secretary of Education search, and then they may request funds from the AOE for that search. This is language I put together after speaking with your chair, and it reads, starting on page 12, line 3, not later than 30 days after public notification of a vacancy or anticipated vacancy in the position of Secretary of Education, the governor shall send a letter to the chair of the State Board of Education asking the board to initiate the candidate selection process for a new Secretary of Education. The governor's letter shall include direction as to the governor's preferred candidate qualifications and experience. And then the state board is required to begin their national search not later than 60 days after receipt of that letter. And then the may request funds language remains the same.
thoughts about that? It's new, slightly new.
Secretary of Education, section 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
When we put in there that the governor shall include directions to the governor for qualifications, does that imply that the board has to follow them, or is it simply that they're there and the board can do at once?
I,
What direction?
yeah, I think just the practical nature of, I think the board can do whatever it wants.
And this is
The governor's telling them essentially,
what the governor.
if you don't give me what I'm
Yeah.
looking for, then perhaps
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
But no, it does not say anything in here. There's no language in here that says the 3 names forwarded to the governor have to have the qualifications and experience in that from that letter.
So that.
Yep.
So that, so we're gonna put, I think I heard goods around. So for yes, next to 9.
Okay, so section 10, the only change here was there was discussion about the title of the statute. And I am proposing that you just call it Foundation for Literacy. That is a phrase that appears in the statute itself. I don't think it's on this page because the language is represented by asterisks, but that is my suggestion for a more positive spin on what this section stands for.
Are we
I
good?
like it.
Okay. Good on 10? Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, the guard tuition benefit program on my page 14, section 11. This should be an amalgamation of all of the changes that you all have talked about to get us to this place. So if you go to page 15.
Yeah, if I can just interrupt this for 1 second. I apologize. I thought this was the one. I can do that. Right? I just recognize the wrong spec.
I
Go ahead, 14 seconds.
you want me to continue or?
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of a side conversation.
You're asking Senator Williams to report the guard
Correct.
expanded tuition
Yeah,
benefit
right.
section.
That's right.
That's a lovely request.
Right.
I support it. If this is the appropriate place.
Thank you.
So now we're on page 16.
We're on page 16, line 8. So this is the eligibility. So nothing above subsection C. So subsections A and B, there's no changes. Subsection C is the eligibility section. So for eligibility, a member has to be enrolled in a UVM, a Vermont State College, or any other college or university located in Vermont, and a program that leads to an undergraduate certificate, an undergraduate degree, or a graduate degree, an eligible training institution in a program that leads to a certificate or other credential recognized by VSAC. And then here is language to get at what VSAC pointed out in Tom Little's testimony regarding the inconsistency in the eligibility section and the benefit section in subsection A. The other eligibility option is they could be enrolled at a non-Vermont post-secondary education institution approved for Title IV funding only when the degree program is not available in Vermont. And that language tracks directly from the actual benefit in subdivision 4 here. Approved post-secondary education institution approved for federal Title IV funding where the degree program is not available in Vermont. Then on page 17, line 19. Here we have that change to how many certificates or degrees a member could earn under this program. So an individual may receive more than one undergraduate certificate, undergraduate degree, graduate degree or other credential recognized by VSAC under the program, provided that the cost of all certificates, degrees, and credentials received by the individual, I'm on page 18 now, does not exceed an amount equal to twice the full-time in-state tuition rate charged by UVM for a bachelor's degree. So basically unlimited degrees, as long as you're under that financial cap. And then, actually, if we go back up to, there's no highlighting, but if we go back up to, page 15, subsection B, the tuition benefit. Subdivision 2, at the very bottom of page 15, spilling onto page 16, contained the language about, for graduate degrees, the member had to be working in Vermont or seeking employment in Vermont, and that language is gone. It was new language, so there's no need to strike through it. We just removed it altogether. And I believe, let's see, are there any other changes? I haven't looked at yet. That's it for this section.
So that is section 11. We're putting a yes, and we're putting. Okay.
So that brings us to section 12, which I did not highlight this. I don't remember walking through this with you all. This is language that was in the BAA, and you all received a request to include it and to, since there is no BAA this year, to use this miscellaneous bill as the vehicle for this language. Do you all remember having a walkthrough of this language, trying to figure out how high level to be? I don't remember walking through this language with you.
What page are you
I'm on page 21, section 12, line 12.
Yeah, and I got at least some indication today that that this language might change in the, since this language is also contained in the budget at this point.
No, that's adult education funding.
Okay, go ahead then.
This, okay.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, you're gonna want to follow that thread. So this language on section 12, page 21, line 12. So last year, I don't remember the act number off the top of my head. I think it was the budget.
We talked about this, but I'm not sure what it like.
Yes, so the high school completion program, which was a part of the Flexible Pathways Initiative, was repealed last year. And the adult education program, the adult diploma program, the age level for eligibility went from, I think, 20 or 21 down to 16. With the thought being that everyone who was eligible for the high school completion program, the high school completion program no longer exists, they would be kind of swept into the adult diploma program. There are some students that are in limbo right now between the transition of the two programs. And so this language says, notwithstanding 16 VSA section 945, which is the adult diploma program, and any other provision of law to the contrary, a high school may award a high school diploma to any student who meets the following criteria. Prior to July 1, 2024, the student was participating in the high school completion program as it existed on June 30th, 2024. And the student has met the requirements of the student's individual graduation plan and would have been eligible to receive a diploma pursuant to the high school completion program as it existed on June 30th, 2024, basically before the budget passed and you made that change. And then subsection B is saying this section would be repealed on August 31st of this year. So the law is only going to be in effect and applicable to a certain subset of folks who need that transition. And then the law would be repealed and everyone would have to follow the adult education program requirements.
Good.
Good. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I've already marked it, yes. I have to go, so you'll get part of this section.
The last section, section 13, I'm on page 22, is the cardiac emergency response plan language. Your chair asked me to plunk this in here. I believe this is the House bill. I don't believe you have a bill. Is that correct?
I don't think they would go on the wall.
No.
No.
Okay. And I didn't see a House companion or a Senate companion bill on anyone's wall. So this is the language from the House. I know you all have heard testimony on this, but I don't know that I've walked through this with you. Do you remember that at all?
I don't think you have.
Okay.
We've had testimony,
Okay.
but feel free to hit it at 1,000 feet.
So, there's a whole, definition section, but basically this section requires each school district and independent school to develop a cardiac emergency response plan that addresses the appropriate use of school personnel to respond to incidents involving sudden cardiac arrest or a similar life-threatening emergency while on school grounds. I'm on page 23. And then each school district and approved independent school with an athletic department or organized athletic program has to develop a cardiac emergency response plan that addresses cardiac events or similar life-threatening experiences while for students while attending or participating in an athletic practice or event on school grounds. School officials are required to work with local emergency providers in integrating them into their cardiac emergency response plan. The plan is required to integrate evidence-based support elements such as those recommended by the American Heart Association. And then the plan itself has to have a establishment of a response team, guidelines for when the team is activated, implementation of AED placement and routine maintenance within the school, dissemination of the plan throughout the campus, maintaining ongoing staff training of CPR and AED use. I'm on page 24 now. Practice drills, integration of local EMS within the plan, and ongoing annual review of the plan. AEDs are required to be placed. Placement shall be dictated by the response plan in accordance with guidelines set by the American Heart Association. Appropriate school staff shall be trained in first aid, CPR, and AED use that follow evidence-based guidelines set forth by the American Heart Association. And then what appropriate staff means would be determined by the cardiac emergency response plan, but it would include licensed coaches, school nurses, and athletic trainers. And then school districts and independent schools would have to have these plans in place and ready for implementation beginning next school year, the 2025-2026.
So, I have a question for you at the very end. Line, page 24, line 18.
We're in the effective date section now. Yes.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so I was looking for section 14. This is.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So the whole bill would take, and basically the way I arrived with these effective dates, and you can change them if you want, is a lot of what's in this bill, it was language that was traveling in other bills, and I just pulled the effective dates from those bills and put them in here. So that worked out to being the whole act would take effect on passage, except the military-related post-secondary opportunities, which is the resources provided during career counseling to high school students, cardiac emergency response plans, and then the implementation for those cardiac emergency response plans would all take effect on July 1, 2025.
Okay, any thoughts or hesitations about section 13? What's wrong with you? So would it be, can I just kind of ask a generic question? So we're all hesitant to deal with force unfunded mandates. Does this require an AED if a school that doesn't have an AED? That's a question more for Tina, if you could identify yourself.
Yeah, so Tina Zhu, Government Relations Director, American Heart Association. This requires a plan that includes AED placement. So it's really requiring a plan, but if they have a good plan, it has to address AED placement. It doesn't say everyone has to have an AED, but it does say it should be placed according to guidelines that recommend certain placement. And I think that's on line 4, page, oops, sorry, I went to page 24.
Yep.
So ultimately it would require them, what the language itself requires is a plan that addresses all those things, the drills, the AED placement.
But there's no money required. It's
There's no money in the bill.
Grants bill.
I'm sorry.
You said there were grants billed.
Yes,
for-
VisVet has $10,000 per school district.
So she,
That was actually that very last point, wanted to reiterate that, just that it sounded like the last time we heard about this, it seemed as if, there were plenty of grants available, for schools to be able to get these AEDs, and just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, our testimony said the reporting requirements for the health department said there were 211 schools or school entities who already had AEDs, and Visbit says they have school safety grants. They're not just for AEDs, but can be used for AED purchases. But they're up to $10,000 for the school district, and no one's ever been denied an AED who've asked for it.
So it's not really non-funded bandit. Similar, right?
Kind of do some paperwork.
Good. Okay, thank you, Beth.
Welcome.
So, is there any questions on this section?
No.
So is she?
Yeah.
Okay, are you supportive of the language? I'll just pass that off to Senator Baumgart's that we're 4 for 4. Go from there.
Yes.
Okay, cool, good.
Can I make a comment? The only thing I would ask, first, I'm eternally grateful that you're even considering this. But if it could be changed slightly to match the version we gave you, which is basically the house language with a couple tweaks, because it was the athletic trainers, remember, that came in and spoke with us as well regarding AED placement. It more closely matches what they have in the Principals Association guidelines. And that's part of our written testimony. I have it here. I can give you a hard copy, but
Okay, can I request that you talk with Beth?
yeah.
And then in the next version, I think, we're hitting this on Friday or sooner.
That's the plan.
The next time. So if you then highlight the changes, and then I think, Senator Baumgart's intent is we vote formally, we'll see what the changes are for this specifically, and we'll go for a vote. So what are we doing Friday? What are we doing Friday? We'll look at the final language. Okay. That Tina just mentioned, and then see if there's just probably Senator Baumgart will give us an opportunity if we develop any questions over the next 3 days, and then we'll vote. That's the intent. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Okay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Will we